Good evening and welcome from the League of Women Voters of Portland. I'm Carolyn Bubert, President. We're excited to bring this program to you. We've named it Portland is Changing, Charter Implementation, Successes and Challenges. As most of you know, voters decided in 2022 that Portland needed to change its structure and election system. A lot of work is now underway to ensure the effective and fair implementation of those changes. We're pleased to have a panel of experts to review the city's progress on the implementation to date. We present programs like this to give our Portland neighbors an opportunity to learn and to think about the issues that affect our lives. We're grateful for the support from the League of Women Voters Education Fund and the Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation. If you like this program, would you tell your friends and family that they can view it at our website, lwvpdx.org, in a few days. We're very lucky tonight to have as our moderator, Melanie Billings-Young. She was a Portland Charter Review Commissioner for 2 years, and now she's a member of our organization. Melanie, I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel to discuss the transition achievements so far and the challenges facing the city as we move toward full implementation. First, Shoshana Oppenheim. Shoshana is Strategic Projects and Opportunities Team Manager at the city's Office of Management and Finance and Portland Charter Transition Project Manager. She'll update us on the current state of the transition process. Then we have Marcus Mundy. Marcus is Executive Director at the Coalition of Communities of Color, CCC, a 19-member organization focusing on advocacy, environmental justice, and research justice to advance the condition of communities of color in Oregon. He will discuss the significance of the changes promised by Measure 26228 through a racial equity lens, as well as his analysis of and hopes for the transition. Leah Benson will follow. Leah is a small business owner, community organizer, and co-chair of the Government Transition Advisory Committee, or GTAC, the main public engagement body for the transition. Leah will share how the GTAC is working to ensure that the voter-approved charter reforms are implemented with transparency, efficiency, and effectiveness and equity. And finally, Alex Zielinski, Portland City Government Reporter at Oregon Public Broadcasting. Alex previously covered local government for the Portland Mercury and has reported on city politics in San Antonio, Texas, and Washington, D.C. Alex will offer her comments on the transition process so far, as well as her thoughts on upcoming charter implementation challenges. After the presentation part of the program, I'll be reading out audience questions for our panel. You are invited to put questions into the chat, either to individual presenters or in general, at any time during this program. We'll try to get to as many as possible. But first, to put this discussion into context, let me begin with a brief rundown of where we are now and the basics of the Charter Reform Measure 26228 passed by voters last November. This is a little statement on where we are right now. Portland is currently the last remaining major U.S. city with a commission form of government. That form was adopted back in 1913 when Portland had a population of just 200,000 people. Under that system, we have 4 city councilors plus the mayor, the 5 of whom double as bureau commissioners. That means that they are in charge of the bureaus, whether it be the fire department, the water department, and so forth. It's long been known that there are a number of problems with that form of government. First of all, it just doesn't apply well to a city of 650,000 people. It leaves the city councilors focused on running bureaus rather than representing the public and focusing on legislation for the whole city. And it leads to a lack of accountability or responsibility to voters. Voters are often wondering, when I have a problem, when there is, for example, too much trash in my neighborhood, who do I go to? Because all of these people are busy running their own bureaus. It also leads, in terms of the bureaus, to something we call siloization, because the bureaus are under specific commissioners. And that means that they don't really talk well to one another. I was on, as Carolyn mentions, the Charter Commission that passed these rules. And one of the first meetings that we had was with the heads of the bureaus. And what they told us was this terrible problem of their inability to collaborate across these lines. And one of the examples that they gave us that I will never forget is that the Bureau of Emergency Communication is under a different commissioner from the Bureau of Emergency Management. So you can see the difficulty they have in communicating with one another and really dealing with long-term overarching issues like we're facing in our city today, whether it be climate, homelessness, and so forth. And finally, that elected officials will often have absolutely no background in the bureaus that they head. And that those bureaus can change every 2 to 4 years, depending on when the mayor wants to change them. So this is something that people have been complaining about for many, many years, but in 7 or 8 attempts to change it, this is the first time that we have done so. The other issue that is important to looking at the transition is the situation we have today with our city council election system. Our city council, the mayor, and the auditor are all elected at large. That means that the whole city votes for each one of them. There are no districts, and those are in winner-take-all primary general elections, which means that the first person that gets over 50% wins. But the way that really works is that first there is a primary election in which the top 2 are chosen, and then a general election in which you choose among those top 2 who will be the person that finally wins. Actually, it's a pretty inequitable system because in the primary, only about 32% of the people in a good year vote. And so those top 2 candidates, even if they win, say 40% of the vote to get there, they get there on 40% of only 32% of the voters voting. So we wanted a system that would be more representative of all the people in Portland. Other problems that we found was that's just too few representatives for the size of the city we have now. We talked to a number of other cities and learned that the sweet spot we should really be going for is about 1 councilor for every 50,000 people. Well, that worked when we had 200,000 people and 4 city councilors, but now we have 650. The other problem, which I mentioned earlier, is no local representation. The one thing that we heard in talking to people across Portland, and especially the farther east we went, is that none of our leaders are from here. None of our leaders understand the situation that we have, the problems that we have. None of them are accessible to us. And also that because it is a winner-take-all system that is for the whole city, it gives a real advantage to wealthy or powerfully backed candidates who can really put forth a big citywide campaign. The other issues with the current system, and I know that Marcus will be speaking to this, is the historic lack of diversity on the council. And as I've already mentioned, the primary voters, which are a small subset, have a really outsized impact on elections. So every 10 years, Portland has what's called a charter commission. It is a group of citizens. This is the last charter commission, which I was on. We met for 2 years to come up with a system of government that we would, if 15 of us voted on it, would be sent to the voters. That was measure 26228. And the voters passed that by a 16 percentage point margin last November. When the Charter Commission met, we met with a lot of people to begin with, citizens across the city, as I've mentioned, the heads of our bureaus, people from academia, people from civil society. And rather than starting out with saying, what do we want to fix? We began by saying, what kind of city do we want to be? And we came up with these 6 goals, that we wanted a system that had more participatory and growing democracy, that was more accessible and transparent, that was more reflective of our whole city, that it was responsible, that there were counselors who understood the community's needs and would respond to those needs, that the government would be more accountable and representative, and that it would be trustworthy. So these were the systems that were voted on by the Portland public last November in Measure 26228 that now form the basis of the transition that you will be hearing about tonight. First, that it would be a mayor-council system as opposed to this commission form of government that I mentioned earlier, with a separation of powers between the mayor and the city council, with district representation and professional management. In this system, the mayor becomes the chief executive. You might think of it as a little bit more like the presidential system that we have right now, in which the mayor would oversee the running of the city. The mayor would propose and carry out policy, would propose the budget, would nominate a city administrator to do the actual management of the day-to-day operations, as well as the police chief, and that the mayor's only legislative role, aside from his role or her role as moral suasion, would be a tie-breaking vote if necessary. The city council would go from running bureaus to being a legislative body. That means that their role will be to develop and legislate the policy that would be carried out by the mayor. The city council, one of its most important jobs, will be representing that district electorate with three councilors in 4 districts. The city council would amend and approve the budget put forth by the mayor and would confirm the city administrator that has been proposed by the mayor. And finally, the city administrator, that is an unelected official. It is someone who is a functional expert. According to the rules in the new city charter, the city administrator must have a experience as well as knowledge in city administration. And that person would do the day-to-day management, would oversee those bureaus, the role that the city council has now. The city administrator would appoint and oversee bureau directors and would report directly to the mayor. I mentioned that we will have a 12-member city council, which will effectively represent a diverse city of 650,000 people. Again, trying to aim as close as possible to that sweet spot of 1 councilor for every 50,000 Portlanders. The city council would be accountable and representative to the local electorate within their district, not to running bureaus. There would be 4 geographically compact districts. I know that Shoshana will be talking about this more. Those were drawn by an independent districting commission that we mandated within that charter review that made its decision back in September, made the decision a few days ago. According to those geographic districts, by the rules of law, the Constitution, they must be equal in population, and the district commission did a great job of it. I think they came within 2.5 percentage points of complete equality while still recognizing both neighborhood and school district boundaries. They must retain communities of common interests, such as those neighborhood boundaries and school districts. They must be equitably represented by 3 councilors each. The reason to have 3 councilors in each district is so that the diversity of people within the district would be represented, that someone they voted for could be on that council. It goes up to the difference between if it's a first past the post system, you have about half the people being represented if it's a close vote, whereas in this system, at least 75% of the people within the district will have someone for whom they voted. The salaries are to have been determined by the Independent Salary Commission. And finally, there will be a single election with ranked choice voting. That will lead to fair representation, reflecting the voice of the entire community. It will give voters more choice, more say, and we are hoping because it gives voters more choice and more say, it will increase participation in the election. That was a really fast rundown of what's going on right now. I'm hoping that Shoshana will be very helpful in giving us a little more context in what that is and what they are working on to change right now. So now let's turn to Shoshana, and Shoshana will bring us up to date on the transition process and the path forward.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for the invitation to be with you tonight and for that terrific overview of how we got here. Every time I hear you present on this, I learn something new, so I appreciate it again. So hello, my name is Shoshana Oppenheim. I use she, they pronouns, and I am the transition project manager for the city's effort to implement the voter-approved charter amendments. Tonight, I'll provide you with an overview of our work to implement ballot measure 26228. So starting off, the city is approaching the transition in 3 phases. Phase 1 includes the immediate tasks that we need to get accomplished to implement the charter amendments by January 1, 2025. That includes providing voter education, delivering a 2024 election using ranked choice voting, and electing a 12-member city council by district, ensuring that the public and that the 2025 council and mayor have the information about the city and the roles and responsibilities to perform the important work of leading the city, and establishing the organizational structure that reports to a new city administrator. So phase 2, which essentially begins after January 1, 2025, focuses on adapting and improving our governance and how the city delivers service for Portlanders. The city expects key areas of focus of phase 2 to include alignment with the new organizational structure and leadership roles, and continuing systems and process improvement to importantly help us deliver our services better. And of course, we'll be assessing our success and the challenges along the way. Phase 3 is really the establishment of the future state, which includes continuous improvement based on lessons learned and emerging priorities of the future council and the challenges facing the city. I think we can all agree that true implementation of the charter amendments will not be accomplished with the 2024 election. It will take several election cycles to shift all of the city's systems and processes to the new form of government and the new ways of working together. On this slide, you'll see that there's a lot of moving pieces in the transition work. And this is just some very high milestones. So the city has established our 3 community bodies, the Independent District Commission and the Salary Commission and the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Thank you so much, Leah, for being here. And this spring, the city started a multi-month programmatic assessment to help inform the city's organizational structure. In April, City Council formally adopted a new election code that includes ranked choice voting provisions. This summer, the city has been working with Multnomah County's elections office and a citywide voter election education partner to begin voter education and outreach. And last week, many of you are probably aware that the Chief Administrative Officer released his recommendations for the city's new reporting structure. Of course, all of these efforts are leading up to Portland's most exciting and historic election in our history. In November of 2024, Portlanders will elect a new mayor, auditor, and council using ranked choice voting for the first time. And on January 1, 2025, we will open for business and welcome our newly elected officials and have a city administrator managing all of the city's services under the elected mayor. So a little bit of a deeper dive into ranked choice voting to supplement what Melanie has already shared. Ranked choice voting allows voters to rank candidates in order of their preference. In ranked choice voting elections, if the voter's first choice is eliminated, their vote would count for their next choice. Ranked choice voting can be used in contests to elect one winner or multiple winners, and in either case, how the ballot appears to the voter and how the voters mark their ballot will be the same. Ranked choice voting eliminates the May primaries for city elections and ensures that more Portlanders can elect officials during one election with a higher turnout. Council adopted updates to the elections code in April, and Multnomah County quickly moved to develop a plan with its software vendor to develop the software for vote tabulation. As many of you are aware, Portland voters reside in Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas counties, with the vast majority in Multnomah County. All three counties are working together to ensure that every Portland voter will have the opportunity to express their voting preference. The counties have developed a coordinated approach for administering elections for Portland's ranked choice voting contests, including the design of ballots and a system for centralized tabulation. Voter education is a critical component to ensuring the successful implementation of ranked choice voting. Voters need to feel confident in casting their vote and that their votes will be tabulated in the ways that they intended. This is only possible with a robust voter education campaign. The voter-approved charter amendments requires that the city conduct periodic voter education campaigns. And the city has a three-pronged approach to voter education. First, government communication channels. The city and Multnomah County will partner to coordinate a broad public education campaign using government communication systems already established. Second, candidate training. We know that candidates running for office are deeply engaged in communications with voters, probably more than anyone else. And educating candidates and providing them with the right tools is one of the most effective ways to reach voters. The city's election office will continue to provide candidate training and will focus their candidate training on ranked choice voting. Third, the city selected a partner to work with the city and the county to create a coordinated voter education plan on educating hard-to-reach voters. The United Way for the Columbia Willamette will administer the funds for a collaborative project with Portland United for Change and Democracy Rising for communications and education and outreach. Next slide, please. The final piece of the elections transition is geographic districts. Currently, all of Portland's elected officials can live anywhere in the city. And as Melanie said, they are elected by voters across the entire city. Our new system, where 3 city council councilors will be elected to represent the district where they live. The charter required that the Independent District Commission prepare and adopt a district plan for the city council elections, starting with the November 2024 election. And last month, the Independent District Commission voted to unanimously approve Portland's first district map in over 100 years. To arrive at this decision, they considered 3 maps, each with different characteristics. One was focused on preserving established neighborhood boundaries, another was prioritizing transit corridors, and another really focused on keeping much of the central city together. The approved map is shown on the screen and incorporates significant community feedback and focuses on preserving established neighborhood boundaries, as well as the decision to include Selwood and Eastmoreland with the West District to ensure that the districts have the comparable populations that Melanie discussed. A district lookup feature is now available on Portland Maps. So Portland residents can take out their phones right now and enter their address at portlandmaps.com and see their city council district listed between jurisdiction and zoning. More information about districts and ranked choice voting can be found at our website at portland.gov/transition. The charter also required that the mayor appoint an independent salary commission to establish the salaries for our elected officials. The Salary Commission completed their work last month after considering a market analysis of cities of comparable size with roles and responsibilities that are similar to our elected officials, and how artificially low salaries are often a barrier for diverse candidates. The salaries set by the commission are on the slide, and they reflect the charter requirements that elected officials cannot have outside employment, as well as the cost of living in Portland. So a question that you all must have is, what does changing to a mayor-council form of government with a city administrator mean for the city of Portland? Structurally and operationally, the new form of government will be very different. City councilors will be elected from 4 different districts with no longer overseeing the bureaus as Melanie discussed. Instead, the Legislative Council will work together on setting policies to achieve desired community outcomes. City staff have been working to identify key policy choices and recommendations to provide a framework to guide successful initial operations of the 2025 Council. Portland City Council will consider revisions to City Code Chapter 3.02, which governs the City Council organization and operations tomorrow afternoon, September 20th. The transition team is also developing plans and recommendations for staffing needs for council offices under this new system. The plan for the City Council to approve this staffing plan this October with enough time to inform the budget development process for next year. The mayor elected citywide will no longer serve on City Council. Instead, the mayor will lead the executive branch and have administrative authority. The mayor will also propose a budget to the Legislative Council for consideration and adoption. The future mayor will appoint, and the council will confirm a professional city administrator. The mayor and the city administrator will work together to implement the laws and policies developed by council. Structurally, all of the 26 bureaus and programs will be under the management of the new city administrator. So to make this happen, City Council directed Michael Jordan, the city's chief administrative officer, to develop an organizational structure that matches the charter reforms. On September 12th, the chief administrative officer released his recommendations for the reporting structure, which organizes the bureaus under the management of a city administrator rather than reporting to 5 council offices as they do now. The draft structure recommends a rational span of control for the city administrator and their deputies. It has clear and reasonable groupings of bureaus and programs that report to one city administrator. Next month, the chief administrative officer will present their recommendations to council for their consideration. After council adopts a new organizational structure in October, the transition will focus on implementation and prioritization improvements to ensure the transition of the new form of government. This will be an opportunity to identify cultural, communications, and process improvements, as well as additional structural change recommendations that will help improve our service delivery for Portlanders. On this slide, you will see the Chief Administrative Officer's recommended organizational structure. Starting last spring, the CAO has been working with the directors of the 26 bureaus and offices on a citywide assessment of services and programs, with the goal of developing a rational reporting structure where programs and services with a nexus are grouped together. The Chief Administrative Officer is recommending a city administrator, deputy city administrator structure that is similar to other cities with a mayor-council form of government. You can see that the proposal here includes 5 deputies who will manage the following service areas: budget and finance, community and economic development, city operations, community safety, and public works. If you'd like to learn more about the proposal, please join our Chief Administrative Officer and the transition team at a community information session on September 27th, and you can find the link on our website. The new organizational structure is one of several governance changes that we're managing through the transition. So I've really tried to stay to my time. So I'm going to save any remaining time for questions and then pass to Marcus. But you can see on your slide, we have a link to our website where you can sign up for updates and how to email the transition team if you have any questions. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to talk about our work. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Shoshana. That was an amazing job in a very short amount of time. Well done. So now we are going to turn to Marcus. Marcus, we're looking forward to you to share your thoughts on the transition so far and how to ensure that it results in a more equitable and accountable government. So take it away.
All right, that's a big order, but thank you very much, Melanie. Thank you, Shoshana. And thank everybody for letting me share a few thoughts and a bit of time with you this evening. My name is Marcus Mundy. I'm at the Coalition of Communities of Color. I use he, him, his pronouns, and we are a 19-member coalition of culturally specific nonprofits operating throughout Oregon, but principally in the Portland metro area. We're also one of the organizations that were dogged in our support of Measure 26-228 because it represented an opportunity for change. You probably, if you were involved in the process at all, saw our team at just about every meeting of the IDC, the ISC, the Charter Commission. We were engaged, and the hoped for change was that Portland city government would work better for everybody, particularly for the communities that we serve, which for so long have been left out of most of the governing equations. And people stop me there because sometimes they remind me, and I say, yes, I'm aware. We kind of have a textbook qualified definition of a diverse city council at present. But as far as I know, we've only had, and I've shared this with other groups, we've only had 6 people of color that have been city councilors and 1 LGBTQ city councilor, at least that I know of. And I've known all 7 of them, and I've only been here since 2000. And for a city that's over 170 years old, that ain't so great a track record, and that's okay. But we believe that Measure 26-228 can begin to influence that change, and the change that my organization and other organizations that we work with seek is to have the council reflect what the city looks like. And there's many definitions of the word diversity, but that's what we seek. Now, tonight, unlike my esteemed colleagues before me, who gave you very detailed technical information, what I'm going to try to provide is the community perspective. And this is from our engagement with the various members of the communities across Portland. And the community is hopeful that the changes in the charter will result in a more representative council, a more inclusive government processes. And it's not just populated by LGBTQ or people of color or immigrants or renters or disabled or older adults, but by folks who actually have their interests in mind and reflect that ethos. And I think because of the way our city structure has operated in the past, we kind of had citywide votes and we had kind of the same results each time. And this breakdown between the ranked choice voting and the districts, we believe will be more effective in showing that Portland's diversity. I've also gotten feedback that the only thing that's certain about next November's elections is the uncertainty. There's going to be lots of unintended consequences, and people have asked us, will we be afraid of that? No, we can live with those consequences if they reflect glitches, not cataclysms. And by that, I mean, I believe as long as the people in charge are actively working for the change, then the glitches will be manageable with what we have to deal with. If they're slow walking or resisting or working against the change, then we will have some rather large problems to deal with it starting in November 24 and beyond. So the community just wants honest brokers working for a shared solution. Have I heard myriad differences of opinion on implementation? Yes. As many people as there are in Portland that I've talked to, I've heard all those opinions, and not everybody agrees one right way to do this. But in all those conversations, none of them told me that we didn't need the change that got voted on in November of 22. Every one of them said, yes, we need change. And then they varied about how to go about those solutions. And again, the feedback that we received was that the commissioners and other folks that are well placed in the city right now, they need to be the purveyors of implementing the intent of the voters, you know. And again, don't slow walk, don't resist, because if they believe in the wisdom of the people who voted them into office, then there's going to be no problem, because those same people voted overwhelmingly for this change. So if they trust the voters that put them into office, they should trust the voters that came up with this solution for the city. So because CCC and so many other organizations and individuals, including the League of Women Voters, have been stalwart people actively working for this change. But one of the final things I want to leave you with is that this change won't happen effectively anyway without education. And I'm going to say that over and over. Voter education, candidate education, community education. Everything we're talking about, the ranked choice voting, that's new to Portland. 3 commissioners in a district, that's new to Portland. The city administrator, that's new to Portland. These changes are real, they're important, they're impactful, and they're exciting. And it's exciting and a little bit scary, but that's not what scares me. The scariest thing to me is if the 650,000 people in Portland are ignorant about the process. And that's why I say one of the most important components of this transition, short of the actual vote which got us here, is educating the people. You heard Shoshana mention some of the money and the groups that are going to be working on that voter education, candidate education, more voter education, but the education process, how to rank choice vote, what does it mean? But as with most things, when people are educated, the process gets demystified and the progress can occur. So from how to vote to campaign finance, which is going to be a big part of this, to ethics, which I hope is a big part of this, education is the key. And so finally, even while I personally don't believe enough funding has been allocated for those groups that Shoshana mentioned, and that's a super critical portion of this process, I would just encourage government, I would encourage business especially, but also philanthropy and anyone else who has skin in the game. And by the way, we all have skin in this game, to offer more funding so that this education piece can invade every nook and cranny of Portland. It is really that critical, because what kind of questions does everybody on this panel and everybody out there get? I don't quite understand it. What does this mean? What's the impact? So the voter education piece, I can't emphasize that enough, is going to be one of the linchpins to getting this done. So I'll just conclude by saying, but the community is excited about the possibilities. We're anxious to help. And we're actually pretty sanguine about the upcoming change. We're excited. So with that, that wasn't technical, but that was based on a lot of conversations and a lot of staff feedback. I will just thank you for letting me talk a little bit about my perceptions on what's going on in the city, and I will pass it back to Carolyn. And thank you, Carolyn.
I'm going to take it, Marcus, and I want to thank you. You have you always leave me feeling more energized than before you start talking. So thank you very much for that. We're now going to turn to Leah. Leah is a member of the Government Transition Oversight Committee. How do you see this process moving forward? You want to share with us?
I would love to. Thank you again for inviting me. My name is Leah Benson. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the co-chair of GTAC, the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Very glad to be here. Before I get to that question, I want to give a little bit of background on who we are and why we're here. So the Government Transition Advisory Committee was convened by the mayor. An idea that was brought forth by the transition team and the mayor was not written into the charter reform process. The reason being that the Salary Commission, Independent Districting Commission have done a great job, but have already wrapped up their engagement work. And so the thought by the transition team was that it would be great to have an ongoing body of concerned citizens who are providing oversight and engagement throughout the entirety of the process. So GTAC is made up of 15 volunteers from across the city. And the goal of it is to engender trust in the process through transparency and through engagement as we go. So what we do is, first and foremost, we learn. We learn so much. Our meetings are rich with information about the transition. I see Shoshana laughing a bit because she knows, like, the amount of information that we're getting is intense and wonderful. We take that information, and then our next step is to engage the community on it. We're just starting in on this piece, to be honest. We're picking up where the Salary Commission left off. We've developed a community engagement plan and are excited to be going out to people to spread the knowledge that we've gained. From there, what we do is provide feedback that's based on what we're hearing from the community, the questions that people are asking, the feedback that they're providing, and also from our own personal experience. So a combination of the two. And I just want to put a plug for how you can use us in this process. Because again, we're supposed to be a key engagement body for all of Portland. There's only 15 of us though, and there are so many of you. We're going to be doing our best to get out there, to be providing education and engagement, but also I want to invite you to come into our meetings. They are public, multiple times a month. It is wonderful chances to get all of the information you could want about the transition from the horse's mouth, from people at the city. And I see so many great questions already coming in the chat. These are great for here, but I also want to encourage, they are excellent to bring up at GTAC meetings. The most power that we have as a committee is access. When questions are raised to us, they are given directly to transition staff, and I cannot say enough about how wonderful transition staff is about answering every single question they receive and making sure people have information. So please come to our meetings, engage, provide your feedback. We want to hear from you. And I think I'm actually just going to leave it at that for time right now, so that we have more time for questions, and pass it back to you, Melanie.
Thank you, Leah. I think we're all impressed by the amount of work that you guys are putting in as volunteers, and listening to both you and Marcus, how much the city transition team is making this a public-led process. That's great to hear. So let's turn now to Alex. Alex, as a journalist, you have an outsider's perspective on these changes that we've been talking about. What's standing out to you as you watch this process moving forward?
Yeah, I think a lot about the role that the media can play as a whole in this process. Similar to what Marcus and others have said, education is a big piece of this process, and the media has a responsibility to kind of pick up that responsibility in some ways. I think it's important to reiterate the purpose of this whole change in government, which is, it's proposed to make elections more equitable and accessible to people who are underrepresented in City Hall. And so, for people who might not have the means to run in city elections, whether that's because of cost or time or knowing the right political operatives. And I hope that in covering this coming election and in the following years, that the press are really looking to see if that's happening. And I think it's up to us to measure and to really examine if the outcome's there. If we're seeing faces from new communities stepping up and having a real shot at winning an elected office, especially from neighborhoods that haven't ever had representation on city council. On the flip side, if we're seeing the city's kind of traditional power brokers easily influencing the council races still and quieting some more independent candidates, that needs to be covered as well. And after the elections, if we're seeing more accountability by elected officials, which is part of the intent of these reforms. I think most media outlets see this election and its outcomes as just a really big case study on the intent of charter amendments, something to evaluate and kind of maybe poke holes in as it unfolds. At the same time, I hope that all media are thinking about how their coverage could help or hurt that outcome. It could be easy to really kind of lean on familiar metrics to determine who we focus our reporting on, like giving more attention to people who raise the most money or have the most name recognition or show up at the top of the polls. But if the purpose of this new voting system is to level the playing field, I think it's also our responsibility to follow suit, to not gatekeep folks just because they're new and little known and might not have a ton of funding. I think it's on us to reflect that in our coverage as well, even though it's going to be a ton of people running for office next year. Another piece is just demystifying the nuts and bolts of charter amendments. Like Marcus said, some of these changes in policies are wonky, hard to explain. I'll admit that I've gotten some pieces of it wrong in my reporting. I've had to go back and correct it. But just because something is challenging to explain doesn't mean it's not worth explaining. It's incumbent on reporters like myself to spend time finding the right experts and anecdotes and weird metaphors to help explain how this new form of government works and how the voting system works. Something that's hard to explain doesn't mean it doesn't work either. I'd argue that most of the reporters in Portland would be just as challenged to try to explain how our current form of government operates and how our current voting system operates. Reporting on politics isn't easy. I see my job as being kind of a translator a lot of the time. And I think that the ability to do so is especially important in the coming years. So I'll end there. I appreciate the chance to be part of this panel and look forward to questions.
Thank you for that very thoughtful analysis of the press's role, Alex. Really appreciated it. Thank you, all of our panelists. I think it's time that we bring in the audience at this point. A number have sent questions in advance, and I know we've been getting a lot of questions on the chat. as Janice is putting together the questions on the chat, I'm going to start with a few of the questions that were sent to me prior to this. And maybe I will begin actually with Marcus. And Marcus, you talked a lot about the important role of education. Someone sent to me the question that education isn't just about voters, and it's not even just about candidates, how you win. But since this is a totally new system involving, one hopes, more cooperation and collaboration among our city council, what role do you think education is going to play in having our new city council to be educated, to understand what needs to be done in this new Portland moving forward?
That's an interesting question. Thanks for the question. I have a lot of ideas about that. What I anticipate is that our new city council will be an amalgam of our old city council and some brand new people. I think some of the unintended consequences I was talking about is that none of us on this panel can predict who are the 12 going to be that are going to be elected. And I think there's an opportunity to have the best of both worlds with that. You take the wisdom and the experience of those who have been in government before, as well as the innovation and the fervor and the energy of those who have not been in government before, and then let them share their perspective with each other. There are some nuts and bolts things about the old government and the new government that need to be explained to people who are actually just brand new in the process. But I think there are more opportunities for two heads being better than one and having some positive shared outcomes. Although hopefully in all these transition plans that the city is encountering or generating, one of them is a transition plan and an education plan. I know there's a routine education plan for new city councilors, but hopefully there will be one that addresses the new city councilors and the new form of government and the new chain of command. But after that, I would submit that nobody who was a first-time council person had all the answers when they walked in. So I think all of this is going to require some time, but we just have to be open-minded and push, but welcome the innovation and the unfamiliar faces in City Hall.
Well, thank you for that. You make me feel hopeful. Let's now move. We have a question for Shoshana. Shoshana, you're facing a specific challenge that you didn't mention in your talk, excuse me. What is the challenge of managing this transition at the same time you're operating under the current system? Just for our audience to know, the current system by law must remain in place through December 31st, 2024. And then the next day, boom, it's an entirely new system. So how do you manage that, Shoshana?
Melanie, another really great question. Thank you so much. As we've talked a little bit about tonight, the transition includes changes to the roles and responsibilities of our elected leadership, changes to our budget process to align with those new roles and responsibilities, new operations for how council meetings are going to be held, developing a new organizational structure that will report to a city administrator. And many of these decisions will need to be made by the people whose roles are changing. So what we've done is we've been working to help our council and our leadership be able to see and understand how these roles are changing and ensuring that they're meaningfully engaged in leading the effort to develop the new organizational structure, the new code for council operations, staffing plans for the council offices, and contributing to the revisions to the budget process. It is really hard to capture people's attention when something seems really far off into the future or feels intangible, especially when Portland is facing such important challenges as we are. So what we've been doing as a team is really helping leadership understand the timeline and the must-hit time milestones, and really helping them see their contributions in the implementation of the will of the voters. So it is a very challenging situation. A lot of our decision makers are actually will be voting on things that affect their particular roles. Our directors contributed to a development of an organizational chart that absolutely impacted their roles and responsibilities into the future. So that thoughtful and meaningful engagement along the process is, I think, one of the strategies that we are using to navigate this time of one foot in with an eye towards the future.
Thank you. Let's build on that a little bit. Leah, you talked a lot about the important role that you are playing in that being that connector between the city and the public, and the role of keeping the public informed. In Shoshana's presentation, she showed us this is pretty darn complex, all of these changes that are going on. From your point of view, or the GTAC's point of view, what are the most important changes for the public to know in terms of how the government is going to operate in 2025? What are you really focusing on in terms of community education?
It's a great question. And like you said, there are so many different facets of it that we could really get into the weeds with each one of them. But to repeat what so many have said before, the first and foremost, we are focusing on voter education about how to vote with ranked choice voting. We want to spread the message as much as possible that it is an accessible, learnable way of voting, that it works, and that we're going to work to make sure that everyone understands it before they're filling out their ballot. I think that is the thing that we are perhaps most focused on, is making sure that we're teaching people how to vote in this new system, to demystify it a bit, because I think that there is some amount of fear of the unknown, because people don't fully understand the process yet. And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get people information. The second thing that I think is really important that we convey is give people an idea of how they will get their voices heard with the new government, because that entire structure is going to change. One thing that's going to be wonderful is that there will be this geographic district specific representation. So based on where you live, there are representatives that you can go to with your thoughts, your ideas, and your concerns, who can help to create policy that addresses the needs of your neighborhood and your larger area. But this also means that you're going to engage with government differently, depending on what your needs are, because the city councilors will no longer be in charge of bureaus. If you have a concern about the Portland Bureau of Transportation, for instance, you're no longer going to go directly to the city councilor that's in charge of that to suggest your ideas for road design or whatever it might be. Instead, you're going to want to go to the bureau. You're going to want to interact with the executive side of things, the administrative side of government. And so we want to make sure that people know how to have their voices heard about their individual concerns, but also how to advocate on behalf of their community groups.
Wow, that is a lot of information. Thank you very much, Leah. Let's actually keep going even farther. So Leah took us to what we needed to know starting in 2025. Alex, moving beyond that, you talked about the important role of the press right now. What do you see as the role of the press in monitoring the extent to which the intended outcomes are being realized? Again, as you said in your talk, it's complex business. So what are you looking for?
I think kind of like what I said earlier, looking at those 6 kind of goals that you laid out in the very beginning of the intent of the charter amendment, and seeing if those things are actually being realized, seeing if people are feeling like they're fairly represented by their 3 commissioners in their district, whether they feel like they can access the head of, or the administrator at PBOT or politician's office easier. If there's not those barriers that exist right now to really get an answer, if you have trash piling up on your sidewalk, if there's streamlined and de-siloed systems in place, and being able to measure that, is just, I think it's less asking the city if it's working, and it's more asking Portlanders if it's working. If, hey, did you try to call about this one thing, and kind of what was the interaction like? Both, good and bad. I think it'll take a lot of kind of qualitative along with quantitative research and reporting to understand kind of what this looks like. And I think there is a big onus on media to continue to fairly and equitably cover elected officials and offices after the whirlwind campaign we're going to have, because we're going to see our city council triple in size. A lot of us who've covered City Hall for a minute are used to just having to wrangle 5 different offices, and it's going to be a little bit more work now, which is fine. More people to ask questions to, but it's more people to hold accountable. And so I think there's also that responsibility to make sure that we have our, we know who to call and what to pay attention to, and make sure that that is still a priority, even in a larger body.
Just a real quick follow-up there, Alex. You referred a few times to kind of the media, and I myself have gotten calls from a few different states and their media. Is the nation watching Portland right now with our multi-member ranked choice voting system and so forth? Are you feeling that?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I am not a member of the national media, but my impression is that there's, especially when it comes to our form of voting, which is kind of a unique form of ranked choice voting, there are a lot of both media outlets and, academics and scholars and folks out there looking to see how this is operating, how it's running. I think it's the same thing that happened, when New York took on a different form of voting, ranked choice voting. People were looking there, and just any more examples of if this is running smoothly or kind of what the issues are. Yeah, there's certainly there's attention.
Thank you for that. So I'm now going to ask questions that are just more general. And if you guys could, if you would like to answer the question, just use the hand raise icon. If there's some problem with that, just raise your hand. There's only 4 of you, I can find you. And so let me start with the first question that I have out that's come in. And that is, with 3 counselors per district, how is that going to work? If a constituent has an issue, do they need to go to all 3? How do you think that system would work most effectively? I'm an old professor, so if you don't say anything, I will call on you, just warning in advance. Shoshana.
I'll raise my hand because I like to be a good student, but I want to make sure if Marcus or Leah have comments that they jump in as well. So I think this is what, from my experience of working in City Hall and managing constituent concerns, it was my job to aggregate issues that were coming in from the community. And so what we expect is that there will be district staff as well as constituent staff for each of the counselors. So I would imagine if I was staffing an elected, let's say elected Monday, that I would be bringing the elected some curated constituent issues that are rising to the top in the district. I would also be sharing that across the district office because I would want the constituent concerns to be addressed at the district level. Those are just my assumptions on how it will work, but I think that it will foster more collaboration across the district to address the highest priority issues that we're seeing develop in the districts. So I would imagine it's a collaboration and it's good communication across the district office of the key issues that are coming in from constituents. And in addition, there will be an opportunity to speak directly to the executive side of the organization, as Leah just mentioned. So constituent concerns coming in through the bureau directors, as well as through the deputy city administrators and to the city administrator in order to be addressed through the organization.
Okay, any other thoughts on that? Yeah, Leah.
Thank you. The only thing that I would add to that is that this is an excellent area for community feedback on the matter, and we would love to know more about what people's expectations and wants are around it. As Shoshana said, there are some expectations and hopes for what it might look like, but nothing is written in stone. So I would encourage people to again, reaching out to GTAC is a great way to do that, and hopefully we'll be providing more opportunities to come to you so that you can tell us what you're looking for from your district representatives.
Thank you. Let's stick with constituent services for a minute. We have a question here about neighborhood associations. In the organizational structure, The neighborhood associations are under the Portland Solutions Bureau with house services, safe rest villages, graffiti removal, and other challenges. What do you think the role of neighborhood associations will be or should be in this new system? Let's see if, Marcus, do you have any thoughts about this? This new system is based on being much more district-based, not neighborhood association-based. How do you see that as changing from a lens of equity?
I have a lot of opinions about neighborhood associations, but I think I'll refer to the district commission. They were as careful as they could be. It couldn't be perfectly cross-matched and cross-hatched, but they were as careful as they could be not to be super disruptive to the shared communities. I forgot the actual language in their common communities, and so I believe they've kept the neighborhood associations mainly intact within the 4 districts. There's a little overlap, there's some cross match, but I think they've tried to adhere to that. And so I think you said it at the beginning, I think those specific neighborhood associations, which are wholly in one district, need to develop a working relationship with the district representatives that were just referenced by Shoshana in the proposed structure, and just say, you know what, the neighborhood associations for this district, let's develop working relationships with them. All of this is going to require kind of cross-functional working throughout the city, and that's another example of it to me. The neighborhood associations, to me, are one example of a group that does not always embrace some of the things that we're trying to do, embrace diversity, embrace inclusion. And I think it's an opportunity right now for the neighborhood associations to kind of do a reassessment and say, how can we be more inclusive units within this new structure? I think it's an opportunity for growth for the neighborhood associations.
Thank you very much for that. Am I still muted? No. I'm going to actually give you a follow-up, Marcus. You are on the hot seat because we got another question specifically to BIPOC communities. It says community engagement has been highly valued in Portland, or is a deeply held Portland value. What part of the city's new organizational structure is designed to help BIPOC and other community groups? Maybe this is for Shoshana, actually. Business associations, neighborhoods, etc., work together to have a voice in decisions that impact them. So knowing very well that our BIPOC community is a minority in Portland, we're still about 75% white, what in this new system exists or should exist to give a better voice to those BIPOC communities?
Thank you, Melanie. I'll start, and again, welcome my panelists, the co-panelists to jump in. So I think that there's a variety of different ways. If you think about the reforms in terms of the elections reforms, clearly the opportunity for any community to come together and develop a campaign or support a campaign of candidates that represent their interests. So specifically, the question is about BIPOC business associations or business interests. So absolutely advocating for candidates who represent and support your interests on City Council, which is our legislative body. And then on the governance side, of course, you'll see that there is a new service area that is specifically around community and economic development. So bringing all of those disparate offices together to be thinking about community and economic development together, and then having a voice within that service area, obviously through advisory committees that are within that service area, directly advocating for policies that support particular interests of the BIPOC business community within that service area is another opportunity to have your interests and your voices heard. So I think that there is more to come in the way that we will be engaging with constituent relations and seeing constituent relations play out in the new organization. But I know that this is an area of focus, and it will be an area of focus before January 1st of 2025. The organizational chart just sets the stage for improving our service delivery, but it does provide a foundation for us to make improvements, especially like the one that you're asking about.
And it might be hard for you to tell, but that's a hand of color raised up there on my screen, Melanie. So I thought I'd share. I two things. One, I agree wholeheartedly with what Shoshana said, or some of the opportunities. And I think there's going to be some trickle-down effect as well, because if, as anticipated, there may be more diversity on the council as a result of having the districts and having ranked choice voting, then that means, and I'll give Salem as an example. That means they will probably hire more assistants and district staff that look like them as part of the transition, and they will use more businesses that serve their communities as them. When I say look to Salem, we in the state of Oregon elected, I believe there's 6 Vietnamese folks, there are Black folks, there are Latinx folks down there. And if you go down to Salem for lobbying or just for a visit, you will see people walking the halls there that you never saw before, which means their presence there brings more presence there, and it brings more engagement there. So some of the trickle-down effect that I believe will happen will be in the hirings, in the business. The city is a X billion-dollar business every year that uses vendors and accountants and consultants and facilitators, and that window will open up. So there will be opportunities for the BIPOC community if, as anticipated, some of the electorate changes in the city of Portland, and then there'll be some down-the-road effects as a result of that as well. So.
Thank you. I have a question here for Leah. Leah, one of the members of the audience asks, how do you think the elected city councilors will act as the city budget committee? The person writes, the process I saw on GTAC slides seemed very different process than what we saw today. If what gets funded gets done, how do citizens have a voice?
Thank you for that question. I really appreciate it. And while we were briefed on this recently, I don't want to speak out of turn and don't feel like I fully understand the process enough. So I'm going to punt that one over to Shoshana, who I think was going to be able to provide a fuller answer.
Thanks, Leah. We are working on aligning the budget process with, of course, the budget process needs to align with state budget law as well as our own city charter. So the roles and responsibilities are changing, where currently the council both develops the budget for their bureaus, and then those budgets are then prepared and submitted to the mayor's office for inclusion in the mayor's proposed. And then the budget comes back to the council as a whole, with the mayor sitting on the council as part of the budget committee. In the new form of government, the roles and responsibilities will be more clear, in that it's the mayor that's proposing the mayor's proposed, and that is approved and amended by the legislative council. So I think what you will see in the future is a more collaborative process between the executive mayor and the legislative council in developing key strategic priorities that are then provided into the mayor's budget guidance for the executive part of the organization. Then when you see the mayor's proposed, you would see a budget that is in line with the council priorities. In order to pass a budget, the mayor will need either 6 councilors plus themselves if there's a tie, or set a majority of councilors in order to pass the budget. So I would think you would see an executive mayor working very closely with the legislative council in order to develop a budget that will move through the legislative process.
Okay, I have a question here for Alex. Alex, someone writes, it's actually more of a statement, but we'll turn it into a question. The media needs to not always interview the same power brokers and branch out to a larger, more representative group of voices. In your talk, you mentioned how difficult that is. Do you think that the local media is up to the task? What would your recommendations to them be?
Yeah, my biggest recommendation is just start picking up the phone and calling people that aren't the usual folks in your speed dial, going out into community spaces, going, connecting to different committees and nonprofits and groups that represent folks that, who aren't the ones who are putting all their money behind different campaigns at the state level and local level. But yeah, I 100% agree. Like I said, this is not a campaign where the media should be one of the gatekeepers in who gets attention and who doesn't. And that's both candidates and also people who are platforming candidates and people who are speaking for them or ensuring that they're well funded. Ideally, that is where the media should be focusing their attention, but it's out of my control. I'm just doing the best I can to try to reflect those different opinions and those different voices. But like I said, it's a really big task. There's going to be a lot of different folks on the ballot next November, and in making sure that we are balanced and fair and accurate as possible. That part of that is up to the community, the public, to also hold us responsible and call us out for, putting the same sources in every single story. So
I'm going to stick with you then, Alex. Another question is that in your reporting, what have you found that Portlanders are most excited about versus what are they most fearful about or concerned about?
In terms of excitement, it seems, I think maybe everyone on this panel said this, but Portlanders want change. They know that what's working right now is not working, that it hasn't been functioning, for the people in the way that they want to see it for quite some time. So there's very clear excitement around something different. What that looks like is, I think, where people are more fearful or concerned or hesitant to throw their support behind. I think what I've heard the most kind of concerns around are just transparency in rolling this whole thing out, right? Like not even what the end product looks like, but how we get from point A to point B and feel like the public understands how we're getting there, and that that things haven't been slowed down or manipulated by politicians or by, whoever. And so I think, there seems to be more concern just around, some kind of, mysterious tinkering going on behind the scenes, and less about really the end product, because most folks, sure, it's going to be kind of a wild ride and it's going to probably turn out not exactly as expected, but it's different. And maybe that's a low bar, but that's exciting for a lot of folks.
That's a great answer, Alex. Let me actually just keep going with all of you in turn. In your conversations with the public, what are you hearing what is exciting them or concerning them the most?
Thank you. I think that this last week, what we've been hearing a lot about is concern about the future of neighborhood associations. But I think that that's from kind of maybe a one group of folks and how they can see themselves in the new organization structure. So if I can kind of pull that back a little bit farther with a little bit more perspective, I think that people are concerned about how they're going to access services that they've accessed previously, and if the changes in the organization will still provide the services that they expect. And will they still know how to navigate the city's organization and the city's structure? And then an area of real excitement is change. You know, I think it's, you know, it might be a little cliche to say, like, people are just really excited for something new and different. And the voters voted with overwhelming support for the implementation of the ballot measure. And so I think that they want to see what change looks like and how we can do it different and better.
Okay, thank you very much. Something you said at the beginning links to a question somebody asked here, and then I want to ask the other two, our other two panelists the same question, but I want to stay with you for a minute, Shoshana. Someone had written in that we talk a lot about these public comments and the things that Portlanders have, the feedback that you've heard, but how is the city of Portland actually incorporating those public comments into the charter transition process outside of inviting individuals to attend meetings?
Thank you so much for the question. So while I'm sitting here in this seat, you know, we have an entire team of really talented and wonderful project managers and staff working on the transition. So we have a variety of different ways, not just all of our public meetings that we've been having through the districting process and the salary commission process, the GTAC, of course, but we also have a very active public engagement email list. So every month and on much smaller timescales as well, we collate all of those comments that we have, and they inform our work. They actually inform either the themes that we're bringing forward to our leadership. They inform how we are prioritizing our work. And while we may not be able to incorporate the changes and the comments that we are hearing, we absolutely read all of them, and they get to the subject matter experts that are working in those different areas. We absolutely share them with the GTAC every month. We share them with the mayor's office every month. So folks are aware of the comments and the themes that we're hearing, and they absolutely influenced the work of the Independent District Commission, absolutely helped them develop their final map in their work, absolutely contributed to the work of the Salary Commission. They were heard and adjusted their work significantly based on public comment. So I think those are two examples of how they influence our work, and we absolutely expect that there will be significant public comment on the draft organizational chart. All of that information will be collated and submitted to our elected officials, and some of those comments will probably be reflected in the revisions to the organizational chart.
Thank you, Shoshana. Leah, do you want to add anything to that, since this is the area that you and the GTAC are working on? Do you feel that the feedback that you're getting is being heard?
I do. I feel like the feedback we're getting is heard. The questions that are being asked are being answered. I think the challenging part is how to spread those more widely now, because when people ask questions, we get those specific people questions, but we don't yet have a great mechanism for getting it out to everyone. And that's something that we need to work on. But the transition team, I can say from experience, is really great at listening to feedback and showing the ways that plans have been changed based on what they've heard from us and from others as well. But again, we need to work harder to make sure that we're actually getting this information out to everyone.
So let me go back to my earlier question, because you are getting a lot of feedback. In your feedback, what do you think are people are most concerned or most excited about?
Yeah. Well, I will try not to echo what Alex and Shoshana have already said. And I think in terms of excitement, change in general is a big one. I'll put a finer point on that and say one of the things that I think we hear time and again is the excitement around representation for all corners of Portland. Everyone is going to have a voice on city council, including folks in East Portland who historically have been left out of the conversation. And I think that's where we hear the most excitement. In terms of the most concerns, I think it's around open questions in that we don't know everything yet. And I think some of that has been shown tonight in terms of having multi-member districts. How do each of those three councilors work with each other? We have some guesses about how it might work. We have some hopes for how it will go, but there isn't yet a playbook that says exactly how it will happen. In terms of someone else asked a question of how counselors will address constituent concerns and make sure that they're being passed along to the appropriate bureau. There is not a workflow for that yet. Again, similar to how multi-member districts work, there are ideas of how it will be implemented, but we don't have every single precise answer. And I think those open questions can cause fear sometime. And I understand.
Well, thank you. Marcus, I'm not letting you off the hot seat here. The communities of color, in many ways, moving into this are the most hopeful and also the most suspicious given history. What do you find people are most concerned and most excited about?
I think you're right. I am suspiciously hopeful or hopefully suspicious, whatever you want to say about that. I agree. But I think they're most excited about, which actually contradicts something I heard at a city council. People I talk to are most excited about the candidate quality. And I heard one of our commissioners opine that he was concerned that we couldn't find 12 or 13 wonderfully qualified people to run for city council or mayor. And I'm hearing the opposite. People are excited about the opportunity to have different brains and different, not round up the usual suspects, but they're having people with different perspectives, ages, experiences, whatever, that are coming into there. And I know at least a dozen people that are going to run. Brilliant people. I don't know if they'll win, but they're brilliant people. They're engaged people. They care about this city. And I think that's the people I talk to are very, very excited about that. To use the rubric Leah was using, the concerns they have. And I think, again, I jotted a note here. I think the education project is problem, not problem, but the education process is going to help that, is that they're concerned. Also, going back to that same city council meeting, I guess, that the existing power structures are going to try to subvert the will of the people. You know, the one thing I noticed at that meeting was that there was an attempt to implement a change or get a referendum on the ballot, which would take the ideas of a couple of commissioners and a handful of their staff and subvert the will of over 164,000 people who voted for this measure. And so they're afraid that the powers in charge that see the changes coming and they're not welcoming the changes, they're more concerned about that. They're not concerned about candidate quality. They're excited about that. They're concerned about people who want to cling to power, you know, without addressing the needs of the people. So I've seen both, but I've seen a whole lot more hope than I have fear or worry about what's going to happen next.
Well, that is a wonderful note to end on. Thank you, everyone, for a stimulating and informative discussion. We want to especially thank our panelists for the important work you are doing to ensure that this transition brings us the outcomes our community voted for. Thanks also to Metro East Community Media for recording this program. Links to the recorded video and podcast will be available on the League of Women Voters PDX.org website. That's LWVPDX.org, and our YouTube channel after September 22nd. Looking forward, we hope you'll join us for our next community education program, October 11th, to learn about the recommendations recently approved by the Police Accountability Commission for creating a new Portland Police Bureau Oversight Committee. And I imagine all the people on our panel will be very interested in that. The League of Women Voters is a membership organization. We thank our members for their generous support in putting on these programs, and we welcome you to join our league. You'll find membership and donor information on our website at lwvpdx.org. We're grateful for your interest in our new election system and form of government. Thank you all, and good night.